So I'm going to start, and hopefully not many more people will join. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to see some familiar faces and some new faces. I'm going to take you through today through a workshop on unconscious process in screens relations. So I'm just going to start with a second. Hey folks, welcome back. We don't know why, can't make the slides work, so I'm going to do old school and use my this. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So let's start. So I want to read you a post that was recently put in Facebook by Esther Perel, who's one of the most, I suppose, known therapists in the world at the moment. So she posted in September in 2020, she posted this and she said, Zoom has replaced in-person sessions, and this could go on for some time. We decided to pack up. And so after 15 years, I said goodbye to my office mates, our daily coffee breaks, and the gorgeous city views from the 22nd floor in central Manhattan. That's Esther Perel. And I think when a leader in the field posts something like this, I think it says something. I think I remember seeing that and thinking, wow. In an article that I wrote subsequently, which was published in the Psychotherapist, the UKCP magazine, I wrote that something has shifted in our relationship with technology. Our online identities are taking a more prominent role. We have changed as individuals and as a society through the experience of lockdown. And as the corporeal world does not feel as safe and predictable, the online alternative can seem more manageable. The COVID-19 pandemic, I think, had a fundamental impact on us as individuals, but I also think that as a profession. And I think we had to adapt in how we relate. I think it was an abrupt and sometimes shocking experience. And our sense of safety and connection has been quite understandably threatened. And I think that as individuals, but also as a profession, it threw us into some sort of a turmoil. You know, and what began as a reluctant shift to working online, I think became a sustainability question. Am I going to work online or am I not? And if I don't work online, what's going to happen? And I think with that, I think a debate emerged about the perils and the disadvantages mainly of working online. In what I sometimes felt was on the verge of some grandiose, almost Greek tragedy-like discussion, which of course is very apt given the circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think there was something in the system that was playing out also in our professional and personal identities. Bolas, in his book, Meaning and Melancholia, wrote a quote which I thought was very apt. In our era, the disparity between the degrees of access to new forms of technology creates a widening gap between those who are employing these prosthetic extensions of the self and those who are not, and are thus potentially disabled. in my work as a supervisor, as a therapist, as a trainer, I've seen a growing disparity between the practitioners who adapt to this situation, who are adopting these new technologies, and those who don't. And I've also seen and supervised people who are working and sometimes leading these sort of critical mental health organizations, and that have really, really struggled with this and went sometimes to a very scared space, and sometimes into a freeze and shutdown mode. As somebody who's deeply invested in the, I suppose, survival of this profession, I want to develop a better relationship with this technology. I think that we need some sort of a language and an understanding that supports us as practitioners in whatever field and whatever capacity that we work, to work like this in an effective way, not instead, but as well. So when I think about our edge, when we are in the edge of something, I think about this model, which some of you will recognize. Check, it's probably not. Is that better? Yeah. Comfort. We have our comfort zone. We have our stretch zone. And we have our panic zone, panic mode. That's a model that, interestingly enough, I've been trying to find a reference for. And after a bit of a research, I found out that actually nobody was actually sure what's the origins of this. So I've traced it to a theory of learning and development by a guy called Vygotsky. Anyway, this is what I'm interested in this bit. That's that boundary between stretch and panic is what I consider the edge. And I think I've been working on that a little bit today. I think that place, that sort of point between stretch and panic is what I consider when our relational frame is disturbed. And when our relational frame is disturbed is, I think, where the boundary between connection and disconnection takes place. That's the boundary where our connection with self and other starts to get interrupted. But I also think that that's the space where learning and growth and change and repair is maximized. And so, the circumstances that we have found ourselves in working online, I think, had challenged some of the fundamental presuppositions that we had about how therapy, how supervision, how training, how teaching is conducted. And so there's two aspects here that come to mind. The first one is about the corporeal presence, okay? For those who are not used to working online before, this is a rupture. But can that be without repair? And the second aspect is that we no longer meet in our space, in our practice, but rather we meet in cyberspace, which I think of as a co-constructed virtual space in its most physical sense. It is my room and yours. And so, when it comes to working online, I want to move you beyond the narrative of technology, beyond the narrative of technicalities. I also want to move you beyond the narrative of the very important ethical and legal requirements to attend to client data, confidentiality, and privacy. These are not going to be the scope of this workshop. There's a lot of material out there on that. What I'm interested in and what I want to invite you to go to is beyond that. What I would like to do is to turn the lens into you as a practitioner, and into what has disturbed your frame. What aspects of working online had stretched your frame and possibly moved you into panic? And to do that, I'm going to refer to one of the basic principles of transactional analysis. The third degree of communication by Byrne posits that the behavioral outcome of an ulterior transaction is determined at the psychological level, not at the social level. So the question for you is, what might be at your psychological level that affects how you relate online? And what can you do about this in practice? I previously wrote about how I see our attachment to technology, our growing reliance, our dependence, our relationship with technology as an attachment. Attachment is a formative process. It's a process which is at the core of human experience. It shapes our identity, it shapes our sense of self, how we relate to others, and in turn, how they relate to us, which reinforces our sense of identity. But most importantly, it shapes how safe and secure we feel. We know that attachment can be a process of growth. It can be a process of healing and a process of connection. But it can also be a process of disconnection, of trauma, of wounds. It can leave scars. It can be traumatic. It can be hostile. And sometimes we avoid it altogether. So with that in mind, I'd like to invite you to another exercise. So my question to you to explore, I'll put you in small groups. How do you feel about working online? And how might you explain that in terms of attachment styles? Would you say you are anxious, ambivalent? Would you say you are avoidant or dismissive? Maybe you're disorganized and fearful. I'll just repeat that one more time. Anxious, ambivalent, avoidant, dismissive, disorganized, fearful. Any questions? No? Okay.
Oh, Ronen, is this a question of our attachment with the technology, or how it influences our attachment with the client using the technology?
Yours. I'm interested in you. As individual, how do you feel about working online, and how might you explain that in the context of these attachment styles?
Okay.
What about what about secure attachment, Ronen?
Sure, of course, that's an option.
You haven't put that up on your board. Because I think that is also possible.
It absolutely is, yeah. Okay, so I'll put you into groups of 3. Okay, welcome back. So my invitation to you is let's take about 10 minutes to talk about what has come up for you. I'm happy for you to just unmute yourself. We can go into what I call an unmute group state. Just speak up, share what's come up, and important to remember that this is a recorded session as well, just for your own safety of disclosure.
I'm glad you're saying that, Ronen, by the way, because I don't think any of the other presenters so far have actually said that it's being recorded, and I was surprised to then hear that it was. So I don't mind. I think it really is something about the etiquette, isn't it? I mean, a lot has been made of, books have been written about the etiquette of online work, and safety, risk, all that sort of stuff. We talked a bit about risk assessment in our group. We have different tasks.
How might that relate to your sense of attachment style?
Well, without repeating what I said in the small group, I firmly go with David Wallen that we don't have just one attachment style. We have different attachment styles with different people. And quoting myself from earlier, there are some people who I'm quite happy to keep on a screen, and other people I can't wait to see in person again. So and I'm not usually an avoidant sort of person, but some people are safer on the screen. Psychologically safer, I mean, not in threat to life and limb screen. Hi, Trish.
In some ways, it is.
Now, so Birgitte and I have supervision with Birgitte, and this is a topic we've discussed quite a bit, really, over time. And I was just sharing in our small group, really, I have an ambivalent relationship with it, because there's aspects of, I can see you can create incredible intimacy. And I've done some amazing work in the year that I've worked in this way. But there's also a level of nourishment, really. And I was reflecting on that for myself personally, in that there's something very fatiguing around not physically being present with somebody in the room. There's something about the energy. And I think it might also just be a personal experience as well, in that I live on my own. So in a way, I haven't only lost kind of the physical connection of my clients that I see all day, but there was a limitation around actually physically having somebody in my house as well. So it's kind of been fed in different ways, really. And I'm thinking, as a psychotherapist, that personal nourishment in face-to-face and attachment to people around me is really important, actually. So I'm quite ambivalently attached to this process. And I think there's another dimension in that. I think when you look at those 3 circles, I think there's a comfort. I think I kind of was comfortable with actually adjusting, adapting. It was a means to an end, could provide really good work. And then I felt stretched because it was fatiguing. I was exhausted, getting tired. Can I do this any further? And then the lockdown was about to be released, and I work in the NHS. A decision was made that my work will remain online And I think that's when it shifted me into a bit of a panic around, I don't know if I can do this long term. You know, so I think there was also part of me that thinks, I think there'll always a part of me that would do online work into the future, because I think there's a great benefit in some ways for different clients and how it works and accessibility. But there's also about matter of choice, I think, is another important aspect. So, and I think the choice was taken out of my hands, and then that threw me into another dilemma. So it's an interesting process I've been through, actually.
And that level, hi there, that level of fatigue, it really resonates with me, because going face to face, I'd found it quite physically draining. I've got a bit of a condition, which means that sometimes I have to manage that on top of the work, whereas at home I didn't have to think about the physicality of my job. But I found psychologically it's incredibly draining. I work quite intuitively and relationally, so it's taken quite a lot out of me. And this was then reflected in conversations with my supervisors, and they were saying similar things, so that was quite validating. But I do think I feel fairly secure with it, though, because it feels positive, because I think, hey, we can do something, we're all in this together, kind of a vibe going on. But I worked briefly for the Samaritans, which is a charity in the UK, and a lot of that's via telephone or email. So I think I hadn't thought about it at the time, but I realised, of course, if I've had that trainings in there somewhere, then that was quite helpful when it came to this kind of work. So I feel okay with it. I feel connected to it, and lucky, really, if I'm truthful, that we can still support people, even if it is a bit draining.
Yeah.
I was saying something like this in our group, although we talked about other things, was that, you know, when lockdown happened, it was a crisis. And certainly running a training institute, the whole of the training could have collapsed if we hadn't come up with a solution. Under crisis, I'm very good in crisis, actually. It was like very problem solving. We can solve this, we will survive, you know, kind of energy. And it was like, right, we've got to learn the technology, we've got to choose which platform, we've got to choose which license, we've got to learn how to do it before the weekend. You know, and it was a bit like, you know, the training goes on. We were meeting groups the following weekend. We couldn't cancel. I don't think we cancelled anything. I think maybe there was one workshop, I think, that got cancelled or delayed. But the training went on, and it was like a fast, quick attachment, which you do in panic and in trauma. It's like a solution has got to be found. And now, of course, we feel very comfortable with the technology that we've found our creative ways of connecting with. It feels very secure. It feels very comfortable in many ways. And, you know, we found our way of ensuring that there isn't too much intrusion into our personal world with different strategies that we talked about in our group. But you know, now it's like, well, how? I mean, for me, the big challenge is I could do face-to-face. I know how to do that. How am I going to manage this hybrid world of some in and some out? That's what the real challenge is now for me, because I know I can't go back to full face-to-face training, because there will always be some people who are still at risk. This is the real, and it's that bit that is really ambivalent, anxious about, and may in fact I'm fearful that it will become disorganized. Can I hold a group where half of them are in the room and half are on screen? No, I can't.
Yeah.
That's anyway.
And that's fantastic, Adrian, because I think it's very easy. Of course, we all want to say it's secure, but this reminds me of the idea of digital natives and digital migrants. And as a migrant,
digital
natives and digital migrants.
Okay.
So Digital natives are people who were born, like my youngest son, into this reality where technology was there. Digital migrants are people sort of my age and older who were brought up in a world where Wi-Fi didn't exist, where phones had a dial, and that meeting up wasn't an app, it was an activity.
Careful, Ronen, careful. You're sitting with a lot of oldies.
So
we do cotton onto it.
but that's not a bad thing. I suppose what I want to is account.
I can't text with two thumbs, that's for sure.
I want to account for the process of what is it like to move from one world to the other, whether you're forced or not forced to, whether it's by choice because you immigrate or because you are a refugee. You are forced by circumstances. And like you say, Adrian, you have to adapt, you have to problem solve, you have to integrate, you have to work it out. That's how attachment process works.
You know, I mean, I must just say this because it's just impacted on me enormously. Is like, when you say you have to adjust, you have to learn it. I remember my father was a refugee, and in order to survive, he had to learn the language, English. If he, he managed to come to England, and so, he had to learn, he had to adapt in order to belong, in order to survive. And so, for the first time, because you use the word migrant in that way, I think, oh, well, I know where that comes from.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Wow.
I
think in terms of the Vygotski's zones of proximal development, we're still in the, we can be stretched, but what you're describing, Adrian, is that's a bit of a stretch too far, to have some people on the screen, some people live, and how do we do that? Because okay, we can go completely into the cyberspace, or we can be just analog. But how do we manage the combination? I think that's what I'm hearing is a real stretch for you.
Yeah, I guess people who are digital natives will just quite naturally not actually see it as a problem. They'll just see it as how it is and carry and run with it. Yeah,
but the analog and digital to the combination, I think I can see that if you're running a training group, that would be a challenge.
Well, although I'm very much a digital migrant, I've been in groups which have been part and part, and surprisingly enough, they've run reasonably well.
I experienced this where there's a charity I run in Bristol, and we redid our website, and there are about 3 other people involved in creating a new website for the charity, and I was part of this working group, and everything was on their mobile phone, and all the applications, different platforms that they used for different elements of creating this website, it was all on mobile. And what I find is that the other members of the group, who are all young, and they would be digital natives because they're all in their early 20s, could move fluidly from one platform to another and understand what the purpose of the platform was and adapt to that environment. What I really struggled with is that there was no physical movement from one room to another, and I didn't really know who I was supposed to be in each. So one platform was for a discussion, and another platform was for some technical, I don't know, planning process, and I was saying all the wrong things in all the wrong places. And
it's too quick.
And in therapy as well, maybe I viewed working online as a problem or working remotely as a problem, particularly with young people. And I think you just said, James, that they don't notice an obstacle. The obstacle doesn't exist because they've grown up in this world.
And what I would say, Neil, is there are other obstacles that are experienced as a digital native that digital migrants are less threatened by. It's not a one-way system. So, and I love, I suppose I'm just taking one of the things I'm taking this. I love this idea of playing with analog digital metaphor, not just as a metaphor for the technical aspect, again, about the way of mode of relating. Is it analog or digital? And do we need to develop a capacity to have both? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but
Well, it's if you stay with the music metaphor, for example, so you're sitting in the same room, and you've got an MP3 running, and then you put a vinyl on with a good stylus, and you know, and then you switch back and forth. I think that would be sort of my, coming from a musical background, that would be my metaphor, and I'm sure that would jar a bit, and people say, "Oh no, MP3 can't possibly capture the depth of the vinyl." So
well,
anyway,
you
don't want
will
to run
not
too far with the metaphor.
No, Brigitte, this is actually, I'm going to give you a very live example of that. Is
Okay.
that the way that music has been done when we moved from to digital formats has changed in terms of the way that sounds that are emphasized.
Mm.
So the sounds that were emphasized when music was recorded and played physically and digitally is different because there are different things that can accentuate.
Sure.
And I think this is the idea that I'm inviting you to get in touch with.
Mm-hmm.
Online relating, there are things that we can accentuate, that we can pay attention to, that we do not get in face-to-face. So this is great, because that takes me to the next bit. Okay. But before we do that, I just want to do a temperature check. Everybody's back. I think Adrian went for a bit of a sun touch.
Yes, get away from the screen.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt, I've got varifocals. They'll change in a moment.
Okay, so the next bit that I want to talk to you about is an idea called affordance.
Called what? What? Say it again.
Affordance.
Affordance.
Affordance. It's an idea by somebody called Gibson. Okay. My slide, I have a reference list that all of it is referenced. So, so the idea of affordance, okay, I'll read you the quote. It's a short quote. The affordance of the environment are what it offers, what it provides or furnishes, either for good or ill. Okay. So the affordance of the environment are what it offers, what it provides or furnishes, either for good or ill. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions now, and I'd like you to notice your responses to my questions. Okay, and then we have a short conversation about this. I'm going to give you 3 situations to get you in touch with this idea. Okay, 3 different situations that illustrate what affordance means. Okay, so I'd like you to notice what you think about this, okay? What is underneath the boundary of the screen that you display? Have you been sometimes wearing things you would never wear with a client, student or supervisee, if you're in a room together?
My wife's knickers caned.
Maybe you've sometimes been wearing your joggers or your pajama bottoms. Have you been wearing shorts in summer?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Are you wearing shoes right now?
No, I'm wearing jeans and trainers at the moment.
Are your socks presentable?
Yes.
Maybe you're completely barefooted.
Always are.
And how might that affect how you relate? So notice the energy that just came up. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a bit of humour there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So what
Does a
did you do?
duvet count? Because one day I was so cold in my spare room that I wore a duvet from here down. But upon listening to the recording, I heard that it was rustling around because every time I moved or gesticulate. So I don't know if that counts, but
Absolutely. So the interesting is, would you have done that in the consulting room?
no, not even a blanket. It would have been for the client.
And so how might that affect how you relate?
This is interesting. I mean, are you looking for responses now?
Absolutely, yeah.
I made a decision. I mean, I was talking earlier about the fact that I've made this my Zoom room, which is my husband's study. My husband died just over a year ago. And so I've now got a separate space, which is just for my Zoom work, training and clients. And I dress up to come into the room. I wear the clothes that I would wear in the environment, except that my feet are bare. I am barefooted. And that feels like a gain because I can feel the ground differently.
Absolutely.
So, but everything else, I even put on perfume because I've always, some of you know me, you know I always have the same smell. I'll tell you about that some other time. But even though I live in this house on my own and I don't see anybody, I still even put the perfume. Now, I think that's an interesting, I hadn't thought about that consciously, but you're making me think about it now.
That's the idea.
I did the workshop with Michael Gavin in the morning, and it was all about, you know, being grounded and being comfortable and having your feet on the ground and stuff like that. And I would hate to. I mean, I never wear uncomfortable shoes, really, not at my age, but I never did really. And I would hate to have, you know, confining shoes just because they look the part. So when I work from home, I usually have some sort of sandals, flip-flops, and now I wear what I would normally wear, but my feet are bare and they're resting on two little wedges that are meant to stretch my calves. I'm doing that at the same time. But I mean, what you just said, sorry, I've lost you somewhere. The thing about staying warm, I mean, if you're sitting there freezing while you're talking to your clients, that can't be good. I mean, I'd rather have a comfortable blanket. Actually, in my old house, I think it was quite cold on occasion. I did have a wrap. And I said, I'm really sorry, I'm really cold. I'm sitting here for 8 hours and you're just here for 50 minutes and I need to wrap up.
The question that has come to my mind from this is not, well, why are we dressing in this way, either just with socks on, no shoes or whatever, or a blanket online, but the other way around, why have we not been dressing this way with clients?
Yeah.
If we see it as a gain, and I certainly wouldn't have done with clients before, but it makes me question now whether that would be okay or not. And I've been with supervisors, experienced, respected supervisors that have had open-toed sandals. One man in particular, and I think, well, yeah, I remember being quite shocked at it.
I don't think Petrushka ever wore anything other than her flip-flops, even in the winter.
Hi, Rona. I recognize your says stimuli for therapists, for example, I recognize now online therapy session sitting, but yoga pose, my chair. I need to clients whole body client. I didn't see whole body. I need to afford focus on much more focus on. I recognize now therapy session, online therapy session, yoga position. I am sitting. I think clothes or barefoot and sitting styles stimulus for therapists.
They can be, absolutely. I totally agree. I also sit in lotus pose when I work at home because I find that more comfortable.
Yeah.
But I would never do that in my practice, in my city center practice with a carefully constructed, designed space. I would not sit like that. But I found that was helpful for me,
Mm-hmm.
the way that I relate.
Yeah.
That's what affordance is, just to start to give you a sense of what affordance is. This situation that we are at affords certain things that we may not do in a different environment.
It also makes a difference whether we're working from home or from a, like you just said, consulting room, because I may not be able to choose the chairs that I'm sitting on. I might not be able to sit cross-legged because of the type of chair.
Of course. And so if you're working in your home, you chose the environment. It's entirely your choice. Which room, what furniture. That takes me to the next example.
Okay.
Do you use a virtual background?
Say it again.
Do you use a virtual background? And if so, what is your thinking behind this? How did you choose it? What might it say about you? What might be projected to that? And if you're not, what's behind you? What is your thinking behind this? How did you choose it? What might this say about you or could be projected to? So I'm going to put you in small groups to have that discussion, and really important that you share, but also get feedback from the other people about either your virtual background or what's behind you. Okay? Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay, one final amuse-bouche around affordance. And then we'll talk a little bit about where I got you. Is your self-view on? And how does having a self-view support or interferes with how you relate? Any thoughts or reactions to that?
For me, when there's a group of people, I like to have my self-view on. When I do one-to-one, I never.
Didn't realize you had an option. It distracts me no end.
Yeah, it doesn't distract
It
me.
took me months to get used to that.
Well, I like it. I mean, not because I'm a narcissist. I mean, I wouldn't be, but I pin my clients so that they're big, but I can still see myself at the top.
Yeah, I'm a little person on the side.
Yeah, but what I sometimes look at myself to check that I am real. It becomes a kind of reality check that I can see what the client is seeing, which gives me another meta self. Because I am the self that's looking at myself in the encounter with my client. And sometimes my meta self will say, for goodness sake, you know, straighten your hair out, Adrian, or it's going to be.
Go will.
Oh, look, there's a bit hanging loose. But, you know, it's like I would never normally have a perspective on myself.
No.
I would be totally in the client's domain.
Yeah.
And
does it support or
sometimes
interfere?
it is. Yeah. Wow.
But there's also a slightly more practical view of it in terms of changing lighting and what's going. Can you be seen? Has my computer been tipped and my head cut off? Or
But beyond the practical, at the unconscious level, what is going on? You know, does having a meta perspective of yourself in a visual feedback loop supports relating, supports presence, or does it interfere?
I think for me it supports because I'm just checking that I appear to be what I think I am. And then when that's all under control, we can carry on.
I wonder if it's supportive in the sense that by seeing myself on the screen, I also see myself in the virtual space along with my client.
Yeah.
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 So we're kind of in a shared space.
Yeah.
I guess we are literally more self-conscious when we see ourselves, even if we're a tiny spot on the side.
I discount it completely. I don't even notice it. Isn't that bizarre?
Really?
I had to think, am I even on the screen when? I think it's a discounting.
Bizarre is not, Hannah, it's that's the unconscious process. We don't account.
No.
We're not aware.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm self-conscious. I'd say actually I find it reassuring. A little bit about like what Adrienne was saying, that I'm still there.
In the cyberspace,
Yeah.
I feel less sure of whether I'm there than when I'm in the room, because I know I'm there in the room. But in cyberspace, this is why we say things like, "Can you hear me?" Or "I can't get my visual up," or whatever. And it's, you know, it's like, I'm here, why can't you see me? Or my PowerPoint is here, why can't we see it? You know?
So it's an affirming of a presence, really.
Yeah.
Whereas you have that affirmation of the presence in the physical world, but you need to see your presence for the virtual world.
Yeah, it's reassuring to me that I'm here.
Yeah, so I think the same. Yeah, because I saw it online. I could joke that every Zoom meeting starts like a séance, and you're not quite sure whether they're. Can you hear me, Doris? Are you there?
Is there anybody there?
But hang on, we're only talking about me as one entity. I'm thinking about the two me's, because I'm looking at me in that little postage stamp, and I'm saying to myself, I'm there, like this other me is there.
Yeah, sometimes
it's like a helicopter view of yourself, isn't it? It's not like coming back from the embodied one in the morning. You know, I'm here because I feel my feet on the ground or whatever it is, and my bum on my chair. I need to actually have the visual confirmation that I'm here.
Mm. Well, I'm here in this space where I am at home, but am I in that space over there, in the side space?
Sometimes I have both pictures. Like if I'm just seeing one client as opposed to a group, I might just have a side by side.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do that so that I can, I suppose, go with the relationships. I want to see myself in the relationship with the client. So there's a third self gets introduced into the
so that there's a screen as a third. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
because sometimes clients notice things like, you know, you've just raised your eyebrow there, and I have no conscious recollection of that. But if I did that, then I might have noticed that I've raised my eyebrow.
Yeah.
Good point. I've never tried that. I need to get my head around Zoom a bit more, Adrian.
Sometimes flick between two.
What I've done to establish a connection occasionally, not very often, but with clients who have been disturbed by this disconnect with me, and a feeling of some feeling of abandonment in the therapy process, is there's a window just behind me, and I've asked them to look out of the window at either at the sky, or when it was during the winter months, I'd ask them to go and look at the moon. And then I would go and look at the moon, and just to say that we're looking at the same moon.
Lovely.
And even though it was a long way away, it was still, there was still a physical body that by which we were connected.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Okay. So that's affordance. And I'm going to take you to another idea that I find very helpful, which is proxemics.
What's it?
Proxemics.
Proxemics.
You put it on your board.
All these new words we're going to learn.
Proxemics.
I'm going to have to go to speaker view so that I see what you're writing. There we are.
Just pin him. I can't see it. You need to tilt your screen.
Proxemics, yeah.
Proxemics. Okay. So proxemics is an idea that a cultural anthropologist called Edward T. Hall coined in 1963. And his definition is that it is the interrelated observations and theories of humans' use of space as a specialized elaboration of culture.
Say that again.
It is the interrelated observations and theories of humans' use of space as a specialized elaboration of culture.
It's like how comfortable interpersonal space is, that sort of stuff. Yeah, which has changed, of course.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
And he called that the hidden dimension.
Okay.
And Byrne was interested in the use of space in interactions, both at a symbolic and physical level. And if you look at one of his, his earlier writings about groups and how things are positioned, that's proxemics. Okay, it is one way of a facet of that idea. And so when it comes to working online, I often explore the experience of proxemics with clients, supervisees, students. Okay, it's not really limited to any particular type. So while I try to replicate my slide here. Okay, so so when I talk to people that I relate online, I invite them to attend to and explore the space between us. So I use the following parameters and language to explore their felt sense. Okay. Distance. Do you experience me near or far? Does the space or the energy between us feels fluid or solid? Does our way of relating feel smooth, soft, or perhaps it's angular and sharp?
Mm.
And what's the temperature like? Is it hot? Is it cold? Somewhere in between. Of course, these are spectrums to explore.
Mm.
One of the biggest complaints that I hear from people is that there's no felt sense when I work online. Well, what if you attended to this?
Mm.
So I'm going to give you a chance to play with this a little bit. Okay. I'm going to put you in. So what I'd like you to think about is to choose a client or a supervisee or a student that you struggle with. Okay. And explore how you would consider these variables. And then what might help you to attend to what needs shifted in your position. Okay. I will give you 10 minutes to do this. Okay. Welcome back. So, another unmuted group process. What came up? What did you notice?
Well, something really interesting that came up for us that I hadn't actually thought about before, really. I just named a client that's quite emotionally, she's very aversive to seeing herself on the video. And it took me a few sessions on the phone before she would allow us to, but she doesn't like to look at herself. And we were just talking about the concept of connection, really. Is there was something important about what it was about actually seeing herself in the picture, really. And we were talking about that connecting to self. So this actually adds a whole dimension that if we went in the virtual space to be able to kind of really, it's in a different way, kind of what her version of that picture was, is what does that actually mean? You know, what is it? And I've got a feeling, I'll say it was not wanting to connect with self and all the emotions that she was actually experiencing. So, so the being kind of seeing yourself in the picture, you can't avoid something you might have avoided before, really. And we were also talking about the connection to self and more compassion towards yourself in the therapy room as a therapist as well. You know, there's something about the connection in the virtual space.
Yeah. Yeah, connection in the virtual space.
Yeah, and it just felt fleshy and tangible. It's like, and I also thought, oh, there's loads of stuff here I haven't actually explored that I need to explore and actually ask the client more explicitly, really, around what she's experiencing and what happens. Yeah.
Lovely, Trish. Nia, I think you have your hand raised.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of things. I want to start with the color first. I was talking to Neil, and actually the reason for this is sitting on Zoom sessions and trying to connect with the client like this, pulling my neck forward. And I did not realize that until my neck is being pulled this week, and I was out of order for 4 days, just lying in agony in bed. And the chiropractor said, the reason for this is because I was holding my head forward. I was wondering, why did I do that? And tried to hold some sessions on Friday. And I was I was trying to lean forward. It was too painful to do that, and the collar didn't let it. So then I realized, because I want to connect, and I didn't know that until now. So I need to adjust myself and have that connection somehow on Zoom in a different way. But relating to your question, what we were talking about is first we were talking about and agreed on when I have autistic people, they don't mind whether it's face-to-face or Zoom, but I find more difficult to hold the sessions on Zoom with them than face-to-face. And I prefer the face-to-face with autistic people. Somehow more information comes through for me from them. And with them, the relationship through Zoom is quite stiff, hard, solid, and it's not as, the energy is quite a cold energy. Is more difficult. But with other clients who, even with ADHD, I have a lot of ADHD, inattentive ADHD clients, or just normal neurodiverse, normal neurology. It's hard for me to think about the words right now. And these clients, I would put them in the 4 category of the sensory representation systems of the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic and auditory digital. With the people who have the auditory and the auditory digital, I'm finding them, they are easy, they click, no issue. With people with the kinesthetic system, the touchy-feely people, they struggle, and quite a few of them said they don't really want to do Zoom because they don't feel the connection. The visual ones are okay as long as we have the camera going and they can see me and they can see my responses. So it really depends, but the best whoever works is the auditory people who like information through their ears, and they like the audio books and they learn through their ears and so on. So that's what I'm finding with people. The kinesthetic ones, the touchy-feely, they report they lose something. They're not often sure what they lose, but they lose something. They like to be in my presence, and they like to have the therapy in the room. So it's an interesting one.
Yes, and I think that's great that you raise that, because I suppose, so if you think about a client that tends to be auditory, cerebral, visual, cognitive, then perhaps what part of their difficulty in the whatever setting they are is making contact, not just online, but outside. And therefore, how might you shift their attention towards the physical, towards the felt sense, towards the physiological, the earlier manifestation of script that is not verbal when you work online.
Yeah.
And I was curious about, I was wondering which of those clients you tend to stick your neck out more.
Probably the kinesthetic ones. Probably those who are touchy-feely, to really try to sort of cuddle them through Zoom.
And so what I'm hearing is that you're experiencing them as far.
Yeah.
And I wonder if attending to that distance might support in a sense of connectedness.
Yeah, I need to learn that. It's really new, because it feels like I'm disconnecting and I'm pulling back. I need to push my head to this pillow right now. And it feels like I'm distancing myself from the group. So it's a really weird feeling.
Weird. What else?
That's reflecting on how the space is a lot more fluid than I had really paid attention to.
It can be.
Yeah.
This is my hypothesis.
Yeah. It's like I'm thinking, gosh, there's a lot of life and movement and stuff going on in this space, actually, that I kind of hadn't really quite appreciated in the same way. is, yeah, it's just making, like, kind of asking those questions really, how hard, soft, cold, warm, kind of fluid, you know, it's like, yeah, it just brings a more of a life into this. There's something about the conversation about it as well, I think, which I've neglected to do, which I think is really important around that connectedness.
And we wouldn't even hesitate doing that, working face to face. But
No.
somehow working online,
Yeah.
something, it's almost like we forgot that it exists. Unconscious process. We don't do unconscious process. It's online.
Yeah.
Really?
It's a whole unconscious process.
What I love about,
sorry.
shall I, or you? I'll just finish. What I love about what you've drawn attention to here with this proxemics is the fact that I can have an embodied experience with the client instead of them being 2D. It's like I've got temperature, I've got sensate. Call it embodied experience. Is that the right word? Or it really is about opening my awareness and the clients. I'm going to ask my clients how they experience me.
Absolutely.
Because it invites them into the sensation or the sense information that they may, as I have, shut off. And so I don't articulate to myself when I've had a client session, did I feel distant from them or close to them? Did they feel hot or cold? Did they, you know, it's like, oh, wow.
Why didn't we do that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is that the fluidity is not always positive, because I might have made sure that my feet are underground and I'm sitting comfortably, but that a person's balancing their smartphone and their knee. I had somebody the other day who's really got a bad back, so he was propped up in his bed and at the same time balancing his phone, because that was the only means of contact. And every time he shifted, it was like, ouch, and you could see how difficult it was for him. So he just could not sit comfortably. So the fluidity can also be, you know, quite painful. It's not necessarily bad, fixed or whatever. The other one is fluid is good and the other one's bad. It could be the other way around. That, you know, having a stability is actually a good thing.
Yeah. Bring it into the room, Birgitta.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to have that part of the conscious awareness of your client.
Well, this is a chap who's got small kids in the background, and the only place that he can find some privacy is in the comfort of his bedroom, and you know, and then he's got the smartphone, and that's, and how many people have dropped the phone in the middle of the conversation? Oh, sorry, I've just dropped the phone, and then, you know, there's all this disruption going on.
This is fantastic. That I'm going to come back to this, what you just said.
Yeah, definitely, because that's significant, isn't it? If they drop.
That's the next step of the workshop.
Yeah.
Let's just so what my invitation to you here is, so this is it, I absolutely agree, Brigitte. This is not about one is better than the other, but it is accounting for where you're at, where the other person is, and what is the adjustment that needs to be made in order to get in touch with a sense of connection.
Yeah.
I'm not proposing that hot is better than cold or vice versa.
Yeah, no, I just sort of almost started to sound like fluidity is good. And
no, absolutely not. It depends on the particular relationship that is taking place at that moment.
And I was noticing my resistance to the idea, and I couldn't figure out why, because conceptually it sounds kind of interesting. It could be a bit shaming if I used it without delicacy, like I've got an 18-year-old client who might just think, oh, it's way too abstract, you know. But I think I was resistant because although I was seeing it as extra work, like the patting the head and rubbing the tummy, it's like I'm already managing quite a lot. And then to add that in, but actually I'm just not viewing it in the right way. It could be supportive and a tool rather than an extra thing to do, you know?
So I want to offer you a reframe in terms of what you're saying. So I'm managing a lot. and
Yeah.
you did this.
Yeah.
So how I interpret that is, so I am very much in the upper part of my upper echelon of my body.
Yes, it's
We
true.
have been trained for years to pay attention to all that is going on for us. So why stop now?
I wonder.
Where does it say that this is not relevant anymore because it's below the rectangle that we see ourselves?
There's something about seeing the 2D and staying with the 2D. And what I feel you've done, Ronen, is invite us back into a 3D version of relationship. Really, I think, really interesting and significant.
And what you're paying attention to is the relationship again is still very key. Whereas we kind of forgot about I don't know, forgot about the relationship, but weren't paying attention to the relationship in the way
We
that
went into shock, Trish. Shock, survival, threat response mode.
Yeah.
That's what we did. And part of it was appropriate.
Yeah.
For goodness sake, there are people dying in India like flies. This is a real thing that is happening at a system level.
Yeah. Very much.
Oh, that put things into perspective for me. What are we so precious about?
Yes, so there's a bit of, it's about survival as well, really.
It will be if we don't adapt.
I've been on screen with people from different parts of the world where these things are going on. You know, a client who said, you know, I might lose connection because we're in a war zone and they're cutting off electricity. I thought, what?
Goodness me.
You know, it's like I just see this screen where he's in his office and sometimes, you know, I ask them to, I mean, these are people I'm training rather than clients, but to show me what's outside their window and or to get some sense of the environment they're in. So I might have on a screen like this people from all different parts of the world, some of whom are in a crisis zone. So I've got a guy from Bali, a guy from the Lebanon, somebody from India, somebody from Iraq, and they're all, that we all make an assumption that we are in the same safe zone.
That's so true.
And that's not true. I mean, an earthquake happened while I was talking, you know.
It really gives us more contextual information in some respects.
And that context
probably very helpful.
Is what the people bring anyway. So how do we account for it? Because we live in context. We exist in context.
Yeah. Well, I've had my supervisees from Romania because I used to teach there for many, many years. And the first thing most of them do, turned a screen round and say, it's just snowing in Bucharest or in Timișoara. And I say, well, it's not, it's just dull and usual here in Blighty, you know, we do this connecting thing.
So this links to the next bit. Okay, so it's a continuation and to build upon what we're doing. It's not a change. So I suppose I was just a show of hands. How many people have had the experience of working with somebody who is in their car?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Definitely.
Oh, blimey, yeah.
Only safe space.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Sometimes, yeah.
How interesting. Almost, I think it's everybody. And so Bolas talks about sight and insight. I want to start playing with these ideas of sight and insight. Okay, what do we see? Or what do we think we see? So how many people, just by show of hands again, have had the experience of working with somebody who's sitting on their bed?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I'd like you to explore, or let's explore a little bit. I'll put you into small groups and then we'll do another bit. So think about a client or a supervisee or a trainee, and think about what you see on the screen when you meet with them. Okay, in terms of the physical location. Okay. And how might that differ from what you would see? How would you see them in their physical, in your physical space? Okay? What space are they using? How that informs in terms of diagnosis of the client's system. So things like social economical situation, the presence or the absence of relationship in the person's life. Okay, just what's in the system? We started talking about this. Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes because I'm conscious of time, just to touch on this and then we'll bring it back. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Okay. So a bit of theory and a further expansion of the frame. In a recent workshop I've attended of the Psychoanalytical Society, Dr. Gillian Russell, who wrote a book called On Screen Relations, argued that when working online, the client has to hold themselves rather than us holding them. That's what she said, okay? So what I'd like you to like us as a group to have a discussion is, what might be the impact on client or supervisees or students' likelihood to regress when working online? And what might have shifted in the power dynamics, given that we can see into our clients and supervisees and trainees' homes, and they can see into our.
Could you just say that again? Sorry, I didn't catch the whole lot.
No problem. So what might have shifted in the power dynamics, okay, between you and the person you work with, given that they can see into your home and you can see into theirs? Go for it, Vonna. We are an unmuted group.
So when I work face to face, my clients come to the front door, they come through my hallway, through my kitchen, through my garden room and into my therapy room. And for every single year that I've lived here, I've hated it, but never moved house. And I tolerate it, but hate it, but don't mind, but hate it, but and I go like this with it. Since I've been online, it's such a luxury for me to be able to shut them out, that I use a virtual background, and I feel so happy about that I can stop them looking into my house.
Gosh.
It's very different.
And maybe it is something to do with power. It's certainly me having some power in this situation. Whether it's having power over them or not is an interesting thought as well.
Yeah, back to move on.
I know, I keep trying.
What sprung to my mind is, if people can see into my home and see my things around me, is that going to have some kind of impact on my potency as a therapist?
Yes, it is. It certainly is. I know that the potency of my therapist is reduced by what I can see in his home and what I can see in his dress. And I am quite critical of art, his environment, his dress, his
Right.
and I think I've shared this in different ways before, but it is certainly a dynamic that reduces his potency with me.
And you stick with him. That's really interesting. And you stick with him. That's really interesting.
Yes. Well, you know, he's good in other ways.
Must
But
have
one thing is really clear. I never want to see him live. I have never seen him live. I've only ever seen him on screen. I can just about tolerate that shape
I think the room smells.
I would have said, Adrian, take it to therapy, but that would be counterproductive.
where you can see how much might get stimulated. I wish I hadn't come to this session.
what I've just said jokingly, actually, and you're saying you use your perfume. I mean, we pick up so much information in an olfactory way. And I sort of, it came to mind, like maybe he smells, maybe the room smells. We don't get that really primordial information about what does this person smell like, what does their environment smell like. Just hit me, yeah.
But we might project.
Yeah.
So what I'm inviting you to consider here is that nature abhors vacuum, and where we think there is a vacuum, we fill the gap with an unconscious process, often projected.
It would be a really interesting.
Very nice aftershave, I think.
Yeah,
Ronen.
it would be. Wouldn't it be an interesting experiment for us to go through and to say how we think everybody's room smells? Yeah, and how different. So how does Adrienne's room smell, and what's the pong of my room, and yeah, go through and see what we all come out with. And we'll get lavender and all kinds of different smells projected.
Yeah, I usually have some aromatherapy oils in my consulting room, but not in my office.
And so what I'd like you to consider is, given that there is something in the power dynamics that has shifted in the way that we relate through screens, whether it is to our own therapists or us as a therapist or supervisees, how might we think about this in terms of okay or adult ego state? And what might you need to attend to?
I think I've become particularly aware of this with the beginnings and endings of, well, not so much the ending, but the beginnings of sessions. So if somebody, I work in this room in my home, and if somebody comes to the door, they come to the door. If they're too early, then we'll contract around that, but there's some flexibility of a few minutes. Online, I feel a discomfort with the power of holding a client on the other side of the or in the waiting room of a Zoom session. I find that intensely uncomfortable, and all sorts of projection goes on. I feel very apologetic. I don't express it, but I feel it must come out some way when I finally let them in.
The power. I can shut you up. I can press a button and you're mute.
That's interesting, isn't it? I feel the opposite, actually, because I've always been at the mercy of whatever time they turn up. If they're 7 minutes early or 3 minutes early, you know, they're at the doorbell, and I wouldn't leave them standing outside. I would open the door and let them in. Whereas online, I don't have to. I can go on at exactly 1:30 or exactly 29 minutes past. And I think to myself, well, you know, they're in an environment that they control, so that they can do something to keep themselves occupied until that time.
And I guess what I'm interested in is, should this has been in the corporeal world, at some point this dynamic where they come early and you will let them in and you're like, at some point that would be attended to.
Of course, yeah, of course. But
I wonder if it is now. Do you check what time they are going in and how long they're on their waiting room before you let them in?
I do, because I have Zoom emails me when they've come onto the call. So even if I'm not there, I get the email to say they've joined the call. So I can still find out, which I find interesting. But I'm getting the same information about knowing whether they're early or late. But I'm not being disadvantaged. I'm not being disturbed myself. I'm not having that uncomfortable feeling, because even if you do work it through with the client, they've still come to my house early and I've still had to feel something about it myself.
So in the corporeal world, as you call it, Ronen, you would have been pleasing them and let them in before you wanted to, and you can hold the boundary in the Zoom. It's really interesting that you feel more empowered to hold the boundary rather than, or even being punitive. But you said, they're in the comfort of their own space, so you're not being punitive. They're not standing out in the rain, and you can hold the boundary.
Yeah.
And what I'm interested in, and I'm not asking you to answer one, but I think that's the sort of hypothesis here. I wonder whether the disturbance is accounted for and processed in the dynamic. Because it's more comfortable, because you have more power. I wonder if the disturbance is addressed because it will be part of the attachment process, and therefore might be an integral and important part of the work to process. Why is it that you turn out at my doorstep or virtual doorstep 3.5 minutes early every bloody time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bolas puts a focus on the difference between sight and insight. So sight is what we see through our eyes, and insight, and that's a quote, involves our consciousness being directed towards the internal world, and it implies interest in the various meanings of our lived experiences.
Will you say it again?
Insight involves our consciousness being directed towards the internal world, and it implies interest in the various meanings of our lived experience. It is from Meaning and Melancholia, page 63.
Thanks. You've just preempted my question.
So he argues that if we focus too much on providing insight to our client or supervisees, as in providing interpretation, or analysis, rather than asking them to reflect or digest or think about it themselves, we can limit the effectiveness of the work. He describes another idea that I really like called refractive thinking. Refractive thinking selects a minor feature of communication and highlights it, sending the core communication to oblivion. It therefore eliminates meaning. By way of parallel process, if we focus only on one aspect of relating through screens, we reduce its value, meaning and impact on our way of relating. Change work, whether it's therapy, supervision, learning, coaching, they are a liminal process whereby we come out different from the way we came in. And so how might you account for the coming in and out of the encounter when working online? And as we are in a process of change at a systemic level, how might you account for your liminal process with regards to screen relating?
I hope there's an article in this, Ronen.
There's two.
Fabulous.
So I have 2 articles in editorial at the moment, and I'm really hoping they will come out at some point.
Well, in the TJ or?
One is a TAJ and one is in the International Journal of Psychotherapy.
Oh, perfect. Wonderful.
So one is theory related and one is practice related. And this workshop is the practice related. I have a whole weekend on theory around this. And I'm actually teaching in Metanoia in 3 weeks time.
Did you say it was called refractive?
Refractive, yeah, in the way of refraction. So if you think about the refraction is when light comes through a transparent material and the direction of it is refracted.
Like through a prism or something.
Yes.
And one of the things in the TAJ, hopefully will be a TAJ, I talk about is refractive transactions.
Wonderful.
Good stuff.
Can you say more about that? I'm fascinated.
Wow, we do not have time. But what I would say is that it's there. So I gave you an experience of what happens when we think there is a transaction. We are transacting, and we are transacting through some sort of a transparent something. I don't know what it is yet. But we are transacting through something, through cyberspace, through a network of connected servers, and so the transactions are refracted or can be refracted.
So are you suggesting that the virtual space somehow distorts the transaction?
So the Zoom prism is a different prism to the face-to-face in-person prism. If you use the refraction through a prism.
Isn't it based on every
different prism
discussed today? You can see yourself, you can shut people off, you can determine when you start and you don't start to talk to them. Your body responds in a different way. Your attention to the physical process is different. This is different. Not, I want to attend to what you said, Andrew, not distorted, which I think is a negative.
Right.
Refracted. It's changed, and there's something about us starting to understand how, and how then it might be useful for the encounter.
So when you think of all the various prisms that you get in New Age shops, and one refracts in a different way to the other.
Because I'm thinking about the two components there are to a transaction, the social level and the psychological level. I'm just wondering if a reflection could be in different directions on the different levels.
Yeah.
I think it can. I think we've not, I don't think we have yet had theory to start exploring this phenomena.
Yeah.
I think you should have said this right at the beginning, Rowan.
I wanted you to sweat a little bit before we get there.
I was thinking, I feel very privileged to be here today, Ronen, because I can see how important all the stuff that you're busy putting together and writing about. And I think it's a privilege to be kind of just hearing it for the first time for myself. In the way that you've brought it to life. So thank you very much.
Trish, that means a lot.
Yeah, it's certainly made me think, and it's impacted me greatly. It's certainly changed my perspective of the space and the encounter on screen. It's made it much richer. So I really thank you for what you've stimulated.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Can't wait for the articles.
No, I'm just kind of...
Any TA in it?
Say again?
Any TA theories that you...
Lots. You know, I've talked to you about refractive transactions. I'm talking about I Self, which is something I've wrote an introduction to it in the TA magazine. So I've been playing with theory for the past 2-3 years in an attempt to understand what the hell, how do I metabolize this in a way that still remains effective and true to what the work that I want to do.
I'm wondering, like, normally we say that in wars, it kind of brings technology forward and accelerates the rate of technological change. And certainly this lot has done in terms of, you know, computer and communications. But I'm wondering now whether it's going to be a catalyst to accelerating things like TA theory forwards as well.
And it does need it. It needs some new
And a turbocharger under it.
some new prism to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the good old discounting is a thing. It's like, what is being accounted here?
Yeah,
What is being discounted?
Mm.
Certainly, I can be stimulated by that to. Certainly, I have been to be aware of how much I have discounted in the
Absolutely.
experience, and so it will never be the same again.
No,
I think we've all phenomenologically been aware of all these various aspects, and we've all brought God knows how many different examples, but we need a framework to put it into, not as a sort of a straitjacket, but to actually being able to conceptualize it somehow.
Yeah.
I feel inspired to think less of it as being a flat experience and to see it as some, you know, like you say, with more aspects to it, because if you only focus on one aspect of relating, you're reducing its value, you said. I feel inspired to start thinking about that now, make it less flat.
I feel energized. It's actually energized me to carry on actually doing what I'm doing.
I think the idea of affordance that you brought to it is really interesting and absolutely fascinating, and gives it a completely new life in a way. Really important.
We've got 1 minute. Anybody else wants to say something before we conclude?
Yeah, one last thing is I find it reassuring that you've created a forum where I've heard so many experiences similar to my own. The difficulties that I've had to overcome, the challenge of working online, and also what's good about it. It's been very, very helpful to me personally to hear those experiences shared by everybody in the group. So thank you both and everybody for
Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I was reflecting on being grateful that your slides weren't working, because it's been a lot more interactive and contactful than it would have if we were shifting between slides and interacting.
Good point.
I don't know. It just feels like a different experience.
Slides are so beautiful.
I'm sure they are.
Slides, but c'est la vie. Another time.
Yeah.
Again, it's a way of, so how do you incorporate technology in the process of learning?
Yeah.
Does it interfere with contact?
That would have been,
you know, I don't think it needs to. I think it can, but it's not
Death by PowerPoint. Yeah.
That would have been interesting. Well, we wouldn't have known differently.
No, it's
yeah.
I really enjoyed your contact and your energy, and again, I really thank you for staying with me despite the technological challenges that and my a few moments of
disaster.
I went outside on the first break, and I did a bit of screaming. Get it out.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we've always had to deal with technological interruptions in my lifetime. We've had traffic problems and all kinds of things like that. So I would imagine that we'll get used to these kinds of technological interruptions as well.
Yeah.
And how interruption, how disconnection is attended to is the bread and butter of our profession.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, that's where the material comes from a lot of the time.
Yes.
Okay, folks, have a lovely
thank you.
evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well done.
Okay, bye, everybody. We'll see you all. Take care.
Thank you.